It's Friday, November 17th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is Charles McDonald. Charles, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. Feels good. I don't remember the last time we talked, but I know we had the draft series. I feel like we did something in between then, but it's good to actually talk about like games that are happening and players that are in the NFL instead of all this projection nonsense that kind of drives me crazy. But I'm excited. Like, I feel like this season's been fun. It's been a wacky season. There's been a lot of good football, bad football, everything in between. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot to close out the second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like exactly what you said, where this has been a very I feel like every year around this time we're probably like, man, this is one weird NFL season. Are any of these teams actually good? And by the end of it, it becomes clear like who the good teams are, and really that every season is weird, right? But I will say this slate of games in particular that we're going to talk about here heading into week 11, there are a lot of like potentially really good games, but a lot of potentially really ugly games. So I think this is a very befitting slate of games for the type of season we are having. Real quick, for those of you who aren't familiar with Charles McDonald, who missed him on the draft series, which, by the way, what a banger of a series, Charles. I just did the reception perception rookie report, so I charted all these guys out for the rookie report again, what these guys are doing right now. And it's so nice to just like, oh, hey, there you go. This is this guy in the NFL, and he was either exactly what I expected or a complete disaster. Not talking about one first-round receiver in particular, but anyways, Charles McDonald is one of our NFL writers. He hosts the Exemplist podcast, so he's the man.
Yeah, okay. Can I admit a terrible fantasy trade that I made in my Dynasty League this year?
Sure, yeah.
So before the season started, I started a Dynasty startup with our other colleague, Charles Robinson, and we were in a super flex league, and I had like the 8th pick, so I zagged and I took Justin Jefferson in the first round. I kind of waited to take a quarterback. So I get to the end of the draft. My team's great. Don't have a quarterback. We do the rookie draft, and I took Jordan Addison in the first round of the rookie draft, and I traded him away for Aaron Rodgers. And dude, every week that Jordan Addison has popped off, I'm like, oh, this is so awesome, but I hate myself. Like, I literally hate myself because I gutted my team to try and get Rodgers for a championship run, and now I have nothing. So it is what it is.
Well, hating yourself is what fantasy football is all about. That really is the core principle of the game. So with that in mind, let's get into the binge, stream, skip, preview, our week 11 fantasy football viewers guide. If you've been listening this long, you don't need me to go over the parameters of binge, stream, skip, but basically we're putting games in categories like it's a streaming service, like a show you're going to watch. All right, there it is. That's the whole principle. Let's just talk about the games, for God's sakes. Starting with the binge category and starting with Monday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles at Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites. It's a 45.5-point over-under. Charles, this game is really important, really critical for both teams. They're both coming off their bye. What do you have your eye on in this one?
Oh, man. I just want to see... I've kind of become fascinated with Patrick Mahomes and kind of how he's playing with the lack of weapons that he has sometimes, because I feel like his distrust, and sometimes it kind of feels like he feels a little anxious on the field because, oh my God,
yes,
if Travis is covered, I got to find Sky Moore or Marquez Valdes-Scantling, or we got to drop like a little trick play to Kadarius Toney because that's really all he can do. And if he can just figure out a way to survive against, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, I think that there's kind of a pathway on the back end for him to have success. And it's just been fun to watch. Okay, like this is what happens when you put like Peyton Manning with a bunch of guys who really, aren't all that great. You can still have one of the best offenses in the league, but at times, I don't think people are wrong for saying, this looks, constipated on offense for the Chiefs. Because even though when you look at the metrics, you look at the success rate, you look at, all the stats, they're still firmly one of the best offenses in the league with all the problems we've seen them have. And I just want to see if he can kind of keep that going against the defense that will really tear your face off up front. And that's one of my keys to the game to watch. And on the flip side, Steve Spagnuolo has done a great job with the Chiefs defense. I remember last year, the big story going to the Super Bowl was, oh my God, they have basically an all rookie secondary outside of, what's his name? Justin Reed, I think.
Yep.
It was like all rookie secondary outside of Justin Reed. How can they slow down the Eagles? They didn't really, but you got enough on the back end. And I think what's been cool about the Chiefs defense this year is those guys have all really improved. Like Trent McDuffie's become one of the better cornerbacks in the league. The depth has really filled out. Chris Jones is playing well. George Karlaftis has stepped up as an edge rusher. So there's a lot of star power here, even beyond just like the superstar names that we know.
Yeah, these are two defenses kind of going in opposite directions from when they last played each other, obviously in the Super Bowl, where I think the Eagles at that point, they had more sacks than anybody in the NFL. They were pacing for, they just got after you. They can still get after you up front, but the crux of that was also they had James Bradbury and had Darius Slay on the back end as like two really solid outside corners. Neither of those guys, I think, has played up to expectation this year. And Avonte Maddox has been hurt in the slot. So that's been like a beatable matchup for teams all season long. No team makes it more clear than when Dallas goes up against them. They just hammer CeeDee Lamb from that slot position over and over and over again. And then, on the flip side, as you said, Kansas City, this is one of the best defenses in the NFL. And you can certainly throw on the Eagles. It's just, I'm so with you that constipated is the right word when you're talking about Kansas City. Because, the end destination is it's going to be a good offense. It's going to be fine. But just you see, Pat Mahomes almost stare at Sky Moore even when he's wide open on a dig route or something. He still just he turns down that throw every time because I don't blame him either, right? He doesn't trust him to it's the drops haven't been the big thing. It's just if there's any contact around the guy, he's not making that catch. I don't think they've really put him in a good position to succeed either. Cause what about Sky Moore's profile coming to the league made you think he was going to be a successful vertical outside receiver as they've been using him? Really nothing. So I am at least curious coming out of their bye. Andy Reid obviously has a great record coming out of the bye. Do we see more of Rashee Rice in a full-time role? Because he's the one guy who's kind of given them something, Charles. But at the same time, I've said this a lot, all the Rashee Rice plays basically look the same. It's just crossing routes, slant routes, sometimes a deeper dig, just over the middle stuff. Can we get Rashee Rice in more of a full-time role doing, I'm not going to say real receiver things because that makes him sound like a Kadarius Toney type, and he's not. Yeah. But can we get him doing more like a fully expressed breakout game from Rashee Rice in a good matchup here? I think that's one of my biggest questions for Kansas City.
Yeah, but I think that's if there was a game for him to pop off, I think this is kind of it. It's all predicated on can you survive the front four? And I think the Chiefs have, I don't know if they quite have the offensive line talent, but Mahomes is good enough at avoiding sacks that they might be able to survive, the onslaught of the Eagles defensive line. But if you can keep him upright, you have a chance to really exploit the middle of the field because their nickel corner situation has been great this year. The Kobe Dean has not been good this year, and now he's out on injured reserve with a foot injury. He just got foot surgery today, so or they announced that he's going to have foot surgery. So there's not a whole lot of resistance in the middle of the field if you can just stay upright. And I feel like that's where some of the issues that other teams have faced the Eagles, when you look at the Dolphins game and they just got bludgeoned up front by Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox and all those guys. I think the Chiefs, they're healthier up front than the Dolphins are. They're more formidable. And, I think Kelsey and Rice in the middle of the field where you have a real talent advantage over those guys who are playing in the middle field is probably where you want to go. Because I don't think you want to be getting to a game where you're throwing passes on the outside to Sky Moore against Darius Slay. That's probably not where you want to be. But, if you can get, if we look at Nakobe Dean, who has struggled, his backups come into the game. So arguably it's probably someone worse than Nakobe Dean. That seems like a big Kelsey game, seems like a big Rice game to me. And that's probably where they're going to have the most success. And I think one thing that's interesting about the Eagles defense over the past couple of years is as good as their defensive line is, and verifiably is good, their run defense hasn't been great either. So, this could be a Pacheco game where you get to stay in some favorable game scripts and, you're not dealing with third and long stuff. So I feel like I'm talking myself into the Chiefs here the more I think about it.
The more I think about it too, I'm kind of with you there. I feel like we get one shot play to Noah Gray, one like the second tight end there. That feels like something that's going to happen. By the way, I just looked at it. Pat Mahomes over under rushing yards is 25.5. I feel like he's definitely taken off for a few like critical scrambles here when they do get past that tackle tandem of Kansas City, when the Eagles get some heat on him. And he has been very willing to do that this year, especially in critical moments and get up and ask for the flag. I mean, Pat Mahomes is like leading the league right now and getting up looking for a flag, which isn't my favorite brand of football, but when you're the best, but when you're the best player in the league, I guess that's just how you live.
Well, it's the NFL's fault for incentivizing all these crap offensive plays.
Very true.
Like the DPI to end or to get the Broncos into field goal range. Like, dude, that's just a terrible pass. And the DB has no chance to make a play on it without running into the receiver, because the receiver has to slow down to try and make a play on the ball. It's just we got to figure out a way to de-incentivize some of this crappy offensive football that we're seeing. But like, if you're Patrick Mahomes, why not call for a flag? You might get it because there's flags in every play for offense, it feels like.
See, as a receiver guy, I go back and forth on the DPI call, that like the Jerry Jeudy one specifically, because, well, I mean, one, I'm not a Jeudy guy, so whatever, I really couldn't care less about that particularly. But it's like, I do want the receiver to get credit for winning the matchup, but Russ shouldn't get credit for that throw. So I'm conflicted, honestly, on that particular
Let's go to college. 15 yards. Doesn't need to be a spot
there
foul.
you go. That's the split in the baby right there. Last thing on this game, I do think obviously people have been frustrated with Devontae Smith in fantasy, but the splits show he's in a much better spot when Dallas Goedert does not play. It's not a great matchup with this Eagles secondary, but I do think it's a spot where you're raising expectations back up. All right, let's move on to the next game here. I didn't think I'd have this game in the binge category, but there's not a lot of contenders for the binge category, Charles. And the way these two quarterbacks are playing right now, I think Arizona Cardinals at Houston Texans, where the Texans are a 4.5-point home favor, the 48.5 over under, deserves to be in the binge category because you got CJ Stroud balling out. And I don't know about you, but I thought there was so many encouraging signs from Kyler Murray in his first game back. I mean, I was just obviously, I'm sorry against your Falcons, buddy.
Well, it's fine. He's auditioning for the QB1 role for the Falcons next year, so it's actually okay.
Okay, well there you go. That makes a ton of sense.
That's my spin zone.
I can't wait to see how he is used in Arthur Smith's offense. I'm sure it will just be a real treat. But
I'll be catching passes from Kirk Cousins.
Good Lord. Sorry, that tripped me up, that image there. But no, Kyler, I mean, he just looked like Kyler, bro. I mean, obviously on some of these scrambles and stuff like that, but he just looked, especially late in the game, I thought that was such an encouraging sign from him.
Yeah, it wasn't always clean, but, I think when you're talking about like an ACL injury, and for all intents and purposes, he beat the timeline to come back because he tore it so late in the year last year.
Yeah.
For him to just come back week one and show the explosiveness that he's always had, I think it's a really encouraging sign for him moving forward, not even just for him, but the Cardinals too, because I think the best case scenario for them as far as their rebuild is concerned is Kyler Murray is the franchise quarterback. Then you don't have to spend a pick. Then you have 2 first-round picks that you can use next year from the Texans and your own. You can maybe go get a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Keon Coleman or something like that. So yeah, I think Kyler just being back at full peak Kyler athlete makes this a binge game, especially across from CJ Stroud. And the Cardinals defense is pretty bad. Like, I know that they held the Falcons to like 70 passing yards this past week, but
that doesn't count.
That's not real football that the Falcons are trying to play. So I think there's a big room for Kyler or for CJ Stroud to go off in this game and continue like the absolutely insane rookie year that he's had. And on the flip side, you can get Kyler doing what he does best, and that's kind of be a magician on the football field and be one of the best athletes at his size. And I think like just a quarterback matchup alone makes it a game that people should try to tune into.
Totally. And that cornerback room for Arizona is still a big problem spot. They've been giving up production to outside receivers basically all year. So, Nico Collins coming back for the Texans, I think is really critical. Noah Brown has given them some legit, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Noah Brown, right? Because this guy has been super productive the last 2 games. And like, I don't know if they're in position to kick that field goal at the end of the game last week without Noah Brown, like breaking just an absurd amount of tackles at the end of it, especially because, again, this is a kicker they had just recently signed. So Noah Brown's been awesome for him, but I think watching that game back last week and like specifically looking at Tank Dell, because they kind of had to throw him in Nico Collins' position because Noah Brown is like, I mean, he's a big receiver. He's a big, fast receiver, but he's not going to be like a guy that's going to line up as your X. You kind of need to have him off the ball as like a flanker and move into the slot. I think he ran about 30% of his routes from the slot in that game. Tank Dell, though, meanwhile, has to be like as your true X receiver on the line, and that's really not what you want Tank Dell to be either. You want to move him around the formation. So I think getting Collins back just in that role allows Tank Dell, who's kind of he's a really good player. He's a really good separator. He's extremely explosive, but he's kind of a journey at the catch point. So getting him free releases and stuff like that, it can take him into a spot where he had like 14 targets, but sub 60 yards in the game last week. I think you can get him more up to like just more efficient production. Obviously, Nico gives you so much from that X receiver position. I think both of these guys are in a great spot this week.
Yeah, and I think Tank Dell's success this year, like, not to take anything away from him, it just kind of speaks to how good Stroud has been. Like
Totally.
being able to the way I feel about watching Stroud in the NFL is it kind of reminds me of how I felt watching Burrow that year at LSU, where it's just like, dude, he doesn't miss. Like he's accurate on every single throw, it feels like.
Yeah.
Even if it's not
nuts.
caught. Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah. And like even thinking back on Stroud in the draft eval, like the whole thing was, well, if you're the quarterback from the Georgia game, you're like probably one of the best quarterback prospects we've seen in a while, but it wasn't quite there. And I think, the Ohio State offense held him back a little bit, but he's shown like, no, the Georgia game is probably a little bit closer to who he actually is as a player. And it's fantastic. Like it's kind of funny, in a messed up cosmic justice kind of sense that the Texans, they found a better quarterback than the one that they just let go, not too long ago. So he's a lot better.
A lot better than Deshaun Watson. And it's crazy too, because I do kind of believe that they wanted to take Bryce Young at first overall.
They'll say now, because now they've been doing like the information campaign a little bit. CJ was always our guy. We were stuck on that, but it was an open secret that if Lovie Smith had lost that game that he tried to win and did win at the end of the season last year, it would have taken Bryce Young. And, who knows how that would have turned out for it.
And I think Bryce would be playing much better in the Texans offense than he was playing in the Panthers offense. The way those two teams are structured right now, it just couldn't be farther from the truth. So, or couldn't be farther from each other. But yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean, I remember standing with CJ Stroud at the Super Bowl with you, like after you did the interview at the Yahoo Sports like stage or whatever. It's just, I can't, thinking back on it, it's just like such a normal, unassuming guy. I'm like, that guy's like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. It's just pretty unbelievable.
Easily, yeah. So I'm excited for this game. Like, I kind of expect CJ to torch the Cardinals, and I think on the flip side, there's a couple tough matchups for Kyler and the Cardinals offensive line with the Texans defensive line. Will Anderson, he's kind of having that Khalil Mack rookie year where it's like, yeah, you're not finishing sacks all the time, but you're close to sacks a lot of the time. Sheldon Rankins has had a good performance, so maybe there's opportunities for them to break through, but that's when I like watching Kyler. Like when he's got to make something happen and things aren't going well, and he can, kind of make those plays where he's 40 yards deep in the backfield and all of a sudden he's run for a first down.
Yeah, I like him in those plays as well. I also like him in this offense a lot more than just what we saw with Cliff Kingsbury. Like, it wasn't a great passing performance from Kyler last week, but I think the more he knocks the rust off, the better he will be. And I think they're just giving him a lot less information to process in this like kind of more traditional NFL offense than Cliff Kingsbury's like spread offense. So I think this is a game, definitely from a fantasy sense, that could go over the total, and like you could end up getting big performances out of guys like Marquise Brown and James Conner on the other side, just as they're trying to, keep pace with CJ Stroud and the boys over there. All right, next game and final game in the binge category. And I don't like the fact that I have the Jets in the binge category, because this is definitely not a brand of football I want to watch right now.
What the hell is this?
But number one, there's not a lot of other great contenders to put in binge this week. I turned this into an article version too, and I feel like my editors will get on my ass for not having enough. Like, are you trying to cheap out on the work? Because the binge games are the ones I write more about, which I don't know. Maybe I should move the Jets down just for that. Save myself some work.
I plead the fifth on that one.
But anyways, yeah, I think you got to have Jets at Bills. Bills 7-point home favorites for a measly 40 point total here. I think you got to have this game in Binge just because it's so important for both of these teams. Like the Jets have no more margin for error. They lose one more game, they're probably out of the playoff mix. I was on Jets Therapy. My buddy Gordon Merck and Dan Savage from college. There's a couple of good friends of mine that do a good Jets show on YouTube. What a miserable experience that existence has been for those guys. But we're talking about it like they lose one more game, they're out of the playoff mix. So they have a lot of incentive here. Buffalo Bills, obviously, like desperate for a rebound after firing their offensive coordinator and losing in an embarrassing fashion on Monday night. So I'm curious your kind of temperature check just right now on the Bills in the post-Ken Dorsey era.
Well, excuse me. Well, first of all, dude, I thought Ken, that was a terrible scapegoat. Like,
yeah.
Look, I don't think Ken is like, Mike McDaniel or Kyle Shanahan,
sure,
brainiac level genius, but he's good. Like he's good at what he does. And I don't think that even with Josh Allen as your quarterback, when you look at how well they move the ball and how easily they move the ball, it's got to, like, the offensive coordinator should get some credit for that. Especially, I don't think that this overall roster is as strong as the one that like Brian Daboll had over the past couple of years when he was in Buffalo. They started to deteriorate a little bit on defense. I think you're starting to see their age and some of the picks that they've missed on recently, and that's kind of where they're struggling. But if I was a Bills fan, man, like, first of all, I am still hoping that if Josh Allen's our quarterback, we can figure out a way to get to the playoffs at least. And shoot, like, anything can happen. Like, we've seen weirder stuff happen than the Bills like potentially winning this division because they're still only a game out from where the Dolphins are, and right now they have the tiebreaker over them. So it's not impossible, but at the same time, the Jets kind of own Josh Allen. And
yeah.
I don't. And it's funny because when you go back and watch the games, I don't really know it's all like the Jets doing. For some reason, like Josh just craps out against the Jets. Like when you go back to the Monday night game where he threw 3 picks, Josh knows better than to throw like 80-yard passes down the field in the triple coverage. And he did that twice. And then he threw another bad pass to Jordan Whitehead, who hit his interception incentive in the first game of the season with 3. But even beyond that, if you go back and you look at some of the other games that he's played against the Jets, he's really only had one supernova Josh Allen performance, and that was in 2021 when they beat the Bills 45-17. But outside of that, it's kind of been a struggle for him. And I almost wonder, because I remember when I covered the game earlier this year where Rodgers tore his Achilles, that was a big story. But the second big story was that Josh had a crappy game against the Jets, and he was like, after the game, another, same team, same result, different day, kind of we can't get over this hump for us. So I'm interested to see if Josh can kind of get this monkey off his back as far as the Jets is concerned, because he kind of needs to have a good game here.
I was gonna say, it feels like they're kind of in his head a little bit, right? Like I think just overall, this particular team has some kind of hold over him. Like you said, that's a really good point about just how much he seemed tilted about it after the game, that they had yet another slower performance against the Jets. So I think that's an interesting dynamic part of it there. Just like what they've got in store for Josh and this. I don't know if Joe Brady changes anything about the offense. Like I kind of like what I kind of like what Brady did with the Panthers a little bit back in the day, but he himself was also kind of a scapegoat back then. But it really is just a weird group of personnel. I think Brandon Beane kind of deserves like the most criticism of anybody in terms of where this team is at right now. Like some of the ingredients that he gave Ken Dorsey to cook up don't really make a lot of sense together. I think you're seeing that more and more. So yeah, and just on the Jets side, man, I mean, I get it. I don't want to watch this offense either. But at least Garrett Wilson will be involved, and Breece Hall. Yeah,
hopefully they can just get something going, because I think one of the stories about the Jets this year is beyond Rodgers playing the game, like if he's going to come back or not going to come back.
Your favorite storyline, I've been told.
Yes. I don't even know if this offense could support him if he were to rush back at this point. The offensive line's not very good. Alan Lazard has not been much of anything as a number 2 receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. And, you still have to account for like the acclimation period for Rodgers on that part too. So it's interesting, like the Bills being favored by 7 feels like a lot, but it also feels appropriate at the same time because you have Zach Wilson on the other side. So I would say like this is for the Bills like about as must win of a game as it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I can imagine one thing that Joe Brady is gonna do in this game, it's like simplify things for Josh and just be like, what do you like to run? What can we put in place? And like, how can we get the ball to Stephon Diggs as much as possible? And obviously it's a tough corner matchup with Sauce Gardner, but Diggs one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's one of the best separators in the NFL. The Jets play cover 1 at the 5th highest rate. And like, that is a situation where we see a lot of just like funnel targets to your number 1 receiver. So big day for Steph Diggs. Wouldn't surprise anybody, but I do kind of think that's what we're headed for here. All right, with that, let's move into the stream category here. A lot of games in stream category. A lot of games in that middle ground this week, Charles. Starting with Tampa Bay Buccaneers at San Francisco 49ers. 49ers are 11.5 point home favorites. The over-under is 41.5. I mean, the 49ers are the 49ers. The Bucs are this weird team, Charles, where it's like they're just kind of happening, right? I don't know about you, how many times you've really tuned in to the Bucs. Like, oh yeah, I can't wait to watch the Bucs this weekend. But it's also not like I hate watching the Bucs or anything. They're just kind of like a team that is existing right now.
Yeah, when I look at the Bucs, I just go back to like my offseason take. I was like, why weren't you guys more aggressive about getting a quarterback in here? Because like the Tom Brady era ends, but it's not like the team just totally fell apart once Tom left. You still have some pretty good and like straight up strong pieces. Like I feel like the Bucs, they were in a great spot to, take that swing and go up to 3 and try and get your hands on Anthony Richardson maybe. But they played it safe with Baker Mayfield. And I feel like Baker Mayfield's been Baker Mayfield. Sometimes it's good. A lot of times it's bad and frenetic, but they still look like a football team. Honestly, I think the 11 points feels a little bit high. Only because I feel like, Tampa Bay's defense, maybe they can muddy it up enough where Brock Purdy or Christian McCaffrey doesn't have the cleanest game, but it's going to be tough for them to score against the 49ers. I think that's pretty indisputable.
Yeah, I think Mike Evans is really the only guy I trust on this offense right now. He's having a great year. You almost kind of wish he was playing with a better quarterback, although he's, from a production standpoint, been incredible this year. I think he's on pace for like 1,400 yards. He obviously this is a secondary that has been beat so far. Not really as much last week against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, but the 49ers have shown some vulnerability there prior to their bye. So I think Mike Evans is still in a really good spot, even though it's a difficult matchup. On the other side, too, I can't quite get my hands or my mind around like the Bucs defense, right? Because prior to that game against Will Levis, they were getting shredded.
Yeah.
I mean, getting lit up. But then Todd Bowles pitches a heater. They hit Will Levis 13 freaking times last week. But how much of that has to do with Will Levis and the Titans offensive line, and how much of that has to do with the Bucs defense? Because I would imagine the larger sample there is this defense getting lit up, and they play zone coverage at the 3rd highest rate according to Fantasy Points Data's coverage metric. By the way, all 3 of the NFC South teams other than the Panthers, Saints, Falcons, Bucs, are the top 3 zone coverage teams this year, which I think is interesting. Don't know what that says about that division. Probably nothing, but probably nothing. But Tampa Bay playing zone coverage at the 3rd highest rate. Typically that leads to like these big Deebo Samuel games. It didn't really pan out last week against Jacksonville, but I think it's another good week to chase it here.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this could be a game where it's a little sloppy, but the Bucs offense just doesn't do anything. And you get to a point where you're just like, all right, 49ers are up 23 or something like that. Kind of like last week against Jacksonville. Because like if they can shut down Trevor Lawrence, I know that Trevor would kill to have some of the wide receiver play that Baker's been getting this year. But it's like if you can do that to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, you can probably do it to Baker Mayfield. So Yeah, this is definitely a stream game. It's like, hey, watch what's on Red Zone. If it pops up, cool. Track your fantasy guys, but it's not something you probably need to tune into, wholeheartedly.
All right, next game up here, Pittsburgh Steelers at Cleveland Browns. Browns are 1.5-point home favorites. It's a 32.5-point over under. I'm sure Charles is like, why is this in the stream category?
This is a skip.
But it's two important playoff teams,
Okay, but off pure entertainment value, I don't get it, because I feel very comfortable in saying that the Steelers are a bad football team. I don't feel like that's a very controversial stance, but they keep winning, and it's kind of hard to double down on.
Yeah,
this team that keeps winning games is actually not very good, but then you just watch them play, man. Like, it's so difficult for them to do anything, and it just feels like they keep getting just the perfect breaks. I know Deshaun Watson wasn't playing well for the vast majority of this season, and honestly, when I went back and watched that Ravens performance, I thought that was even a little bit overrated too, because a lot of stuff in the second half was just dinking and dunking down the field, and like you had like one real throw there in the second half. But
well, every insider needed to remind you when the surgery was announced that he did play hurt that entire second half. I mean, that was quite a moment from all the big national reporters there. That was adorable.
Yeah. We couldn't have put that together without ourselves, without our own brains.
Thank you, guys.
But he's better than PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who is in line to start this weekend. So, look, I kind of expect the Steelers to win this game. I don't really see where the Browns are going to be able to generate this offense unless like Dorian Thompson-Robinson has this, kind of random breakout game that no one was expecting, because when he got the moments earlier this year, it's not like it looked all that pretty. And even as inconsistent and up and down the Steelers defense has been, the one thing that they absolutely have is game breakers. So yeah, maybe they're not the best down-to-down defense, but in any moment, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Joey Porter Jr. at times this season can make a big play that kind of turns the game, and that's where it could flip. It feels crazy to say like two teams that are in the wild card right now. I don't want to watch this game, but I just don't like watching the Steelers play. I just don't.
Yeah.
And I don't feel bad about it.
I get it. I just wish they had a better quarterback.
Yeah.
Or maybe Kenny Pickett's playing in a different offense. They're definitely in that sort of like, is it this or is it that? Is it this or is it that? Like when it's probably both things are bad. Matt Canada's offense is bad and Kenny Pickett is not good. And like one is not going to save the other. But I think if I had to choose, Charles, like if I could remove one of these guys and just put in like an upgraded version, as much as I hate Matt Canada's offense, and I hate Matt Canada's offense, and for the record, I hated it before it was cool to hate it. All right. I've been hating on this offense for a long time. I think I would rather remove Kenny Pickett and put in like an above average, above replacement level quarterback than remove Matt Canada and put in like an above average, above replacement level offensive coordinator. I think that would upgrade the unit more.
Yeah. Go like if you're the Steelers, yeah, you took Kenny Pickett with a first round pick, and by the grace of God, you've been able to win a bunch of games with him as your quarterback. But that shouldn't leave you complacent on what is possible for you. Like, I would be trying to go get Kirk Cousins, Jacoby Brissett. I don't know, because it feels like there's a lot of clear upgrades to what you have right now. And with the roster, man, like it's always like in a position to win now. Go get a quarterback. I don't know like where you land on the George Pickens debate on how good he is, but I feel okay enough with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Freiermuth when he gets back. Broderick Jones is coming into his own as a left tackle. So man, it's just go get a quarterback, Mike Tomlin. Don't sell yourself to this. You know what really good quarterback play looks like. You had it for like 15 years. Go get another one.
Yeah, I am a George Pickens centrist. I think he is a little overhyped in some circles, a little overrated in some circles. It's like, oh man, this is secretly one of the elite receivers in the league because of the crazy catches and stuff like that. But he's a good player. And like what we shouldn't be in the position, Charles, is like only one of these guys, because Deontay Johnson's a really quality receiver. Like only one of these guys can have a good game at any single moment. Like it has to either be Deontay Johnson catches his first touchdown of the year, or first touchdown in well over a year, but George Pickens has minus receiving yards. Like it shouldn't have to be that way, but in this offense with this quarterback, it is that way, and I think that's what leads to the frustration for these receivers. They have been running the ball really well. Austin and I broke that down for Eckler's Edge this week. The last 2 weeks, Jaylen Warren has given them something, and that's actually made Najee Harris, I think, better off not being like a 20-touch grinder back, actually having some change of pace there. So those two guys are tough from like a fantasy standpoint to trust, because you could either get what you've got in the last couple of weeks, or you could really have one of those like empty calories, 11 carries for 40 yards from Najee, which is good for the Steelers, but not great for your fantasy team. So that is a little tough. I don't know that there's a ton of guys I'm like trying to start in this game, but I think obviously you kind of know the names like Amari Cooper. I think probably the Steelers receiver still, even though it's a tough defense, one of those guys is going to have a big game. It's just, I think it probably could be Deontay, given just the amount of man coverage that the Cleveland Browns play. So that is something at least to note.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much more to say about this game.
All right, well, let's move on to this next one. I don't know how much more you're going to have to say about this, but Chicago Bears at Detroit Lions. Lions are 7.5 point home favorites, over under of 47.5. Look, the Lions should be in the stream category all on their own. They're a great team. Love to watch them. They got their 2 running backs out there now. Super fun stuff. On the Bears side, at least we're getting Justin Fields back. But is that good? But like, how good is that we're getting Justin Fields back? I'm no Bajent bro, but
it's better.
It's better, yes.
Okay, I think this game is kind of interesting, and okay. I would put it towards the top of the stream category, honestly, because you get Justin Fields back.
Well, the stream is not ranked within the categories,
Okay, well then maybe
too much work.
I would put it in a fringe binge category.
Fringe binge. Ooh, okay,
fringe binge.
I like that.
Because you have
sell me.
Justin Fields is back, which on its own is a level of chaos football that I can kind of get behind just about every week, even if it's bad. And a lot of time it's bad. But sometimes you'll see an 80-yard touchdown run, and that's cool. This Lions defense, over, let's call it the past month of football, has not been playing overly well. If you go to Ben Baldwin's site, rbsdon'tmatter.com, I hate saying the name of that website.
Just say the disrespectful name. Just say Arby's or RBS.
rbsdm.com. Over the past 4 weeks of football, and I think that you can kind of get into this part of the season where you can start looking at trends, because, 3 injuries and changes throughout the season, you're never going to get like uniform performance all the way through. Over the past month, the Lions have ranked 28th in expected points allowed per play on defense. The only defenses that are worse than them in that time frame are the Tennessee Titans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I just said have an intriguing defense, the New England Patriots, and the Buffalo Bills. In that same time frame, the Bears are 7th on defense. And I know that that's going to be boosted by playing against Bryce Young in the Panthers. And I know that the Lions they're going to get docked for getting shredded by Justin Herbert in the Chargers. But there's kind of opportunities for Justin Fields to maybe not win the game, but make enough plays where it's close. And on the flip side, like, the Bears, they might have the best rush defense in football right now. We know the Lions want to be a team that can really run the ball. Montez Sweat, I don't know about trading for him plus paying for him, but he's been a huge upgrade for the Bears defensive line, I think in a pretty tangible way. So, like, I don't know. The reason I call this a fringe binge game is because I don't think it'll be overly exciting. I think it's just like, if you like just grind it out, tough football with maybe some big plays from Justin Fields in between, this could be a game that you can get into.
Yeah, I think you look at this game on paper, and I'm glad we're talking about the improvements of the Bears defense, especially as a run defense. That was such a crazy game against the Panthers. I mean, not an interesting game to watch on the broadcast at all, but like, that defense just played a bunch of man coverage and squatted on short routes, because that's all that you need to do against the Panthers. So I don't know how much it take like, oh, great game plan for Matt Eberflus or anything like that. I mean, it's tough with the Panthers. But what it revealed and really has been a continuation of, is what you said, that they've been a pretty solid run defense up front, and adding Montez Sweat's been a nice like sprinkle of like seasoning salt on top of this thing that was already building. I think a lot of people will look at this like, oh, Bears suck, their defense sucks. And you know what? Dave Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, monster game from the Lions on the ground. But I could see it not playing out that way. I mean, I think those guys are still must start RB2s in fantasy. Like, you got to just go for it because this is a great offensive ecosystem, and overall, like, those guys are just humming right now in their own individual roles. But at the same time, I do think I could see a scenario where the Bears are able to actually hold an advantage on the line of scrimmage over the Lions, which usually you don't say about any team.
Yeah. I mean, look, they got a lot of flack for the linebacker moves that they've made. I mean, especially when you watch Roquan Smith and how he's playing with the Ravens, it's a little questionable to just kind of replace him with Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. But those guys aren't as bad as they were at the start of the year. And Montez Sweat, like, he really has added a kind of a force that they needed on the edge. He's not Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons or anything like that, but he's a really, really good player in his own right. And I think that trade will end up being fine for them. And right now, it kind of feels like we've come a long way from like week 2, week 3, when they're having the drama with their defensive coordinator. They're getting blown out every single week. They're not playing a lick of defense. They've kind of grown up as the season's come along, and I kind of think they can give the Lions a little bit of a game, more than people are suggesting right now.
Yeah, especially with Fields back. And I think the big beneficiary of Fields being back is like DJ Moore gets back into like fringe top 10 receiver territory to me, because the target totals were there with Tyson Bagent. I mean, like 9, 5, 6, 9, 8 in the Vikings game before when Bagent came in for Fields. So like the target totals have been there. The downfield plays haven't been there. Hasn't cleared 60 yards in any of those games. But like, we don't need to say like, they obviously got tore up by the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers weren't playing well offensively, especially in the pass game before going against the Lions defense last week. So I think the fact that Keenan Allen ripped up that defense, I think DJ Moore, who, is more of a vertical X than Keenan Allen obviously is at this point in his career, but still he can be moved around and have some of those matchups there. So I like DJ Moore for a potential wide receiver 1 performance in this game. Speaking of the Chargers, next game up here, Los Angeles Chargers, 3-point favorites going to Green Bay to take on the Packers, 43.5 over under. This one is a very mixed game to me. The Chargers are a weird, bizarre team, and the Packers are a bit of a bizarre team as well, Charles. Although I think Jordan Love kind of quietly had his best game, or at least best game in a while last week against the Steelers.
Yeah, Jordan Love is like, the way that I would describe the way he passes, like if he could just calm down a little bit, I think he'd be so much better than he is. Because I think when you watch him play, like he kind of gets what's going on, and he's got the physical ability to make just about any play, but he treats every pass like a trick shot pass almost. Like he watched too much of like 2011 Rodgers tape as he was getting ready, because everything is like, I'm flinging off my back foot. I got the arm talent to just get. You're not prime Aaron Rodgers, buddy. Like, I think you can be a good quarterback, but you're not quite there. If there's any team that is gettable with a bad defensive performance, it's the Chargers. I don't know if I don't know if they have the weaponry to really have an explosive game on offense, because they're just so young. You look at Jordan Love is in his first year as a starter. Due to the injuries on the offensive line, they've had a bunch of young guys starting there. The wide receiver room is super green. Crazy. I mean, Christian Watson, Jalen Reed, Romeo Dobbs, like these guys are all, Dontavian Wicks, these guys are all in their first or second year in the NFL. So, to a degree, these growing pains should be expected. But at some point, I think you need to show that you belong. And this could be the game for that, because I mean, the Chargers, they just gave up 41 points last week. I don't know if that's possible for them, but I don't see why they couldn't have an explosive game like for what counts for them.
Yeah, I'm ready to see more of Jaden Reed and more of Dontavian Wicks and a little bit less of Christian Watson as like the number 1 read for this offense, because he's just been, I think Love has and I said this on a show this week, is that like I think he's been pretty let down by Watson in a lot of scenarios because like I don't think he trusts his top receiver, which is I think made him feel more like he's got to take these trick shots and stuff like that, which is really made the accuracy suffer. I don't want to become like a Jordan Love guy or anything like that. It's really not what I'm trying to do here, but I do think I'm ready to see like, all right, Jaden Reed, who hasn't been perfect this year, Dontavian Wicks hasn't been perfect this year, but let's see like in more expanded roles what those guys could do. I think Reed makes for a nice sleeper this week as a slot guy. The Chargers have obviously just been torn up all over the place. And then the Chargers, man, I don't know. I mean, we got to see if Keenan Allen plays. If Keenan Allen doesn't play, I have no idea what they're going to do from a pass offense standpoint other than like potentially 10 Austin Eckler checkdowns.
Yeah. It's kind of baffling that it feels like they've invested so much in the offense, and it just feels like the margins are still so razor thin for them. You know, you have Austin, you have Keenan, but like if Keenan doesn't play, Quentin Johnson, and I don't even know if Herbert likes throwing him the ball that much. So I would still expect the Chargers to win this game. I think it might be a tough game on the road for them, just because at this point of the year, especially for warm teams in the Dome, like that can be a little bit of a tough environment at Lambeau in late November. But you know, I think they have enough to get over the Packers just because the Packers are so young. Like once this season started for the Packers, it was like, okay, 2024 is actually the year that matters for you. You got they're just too young to kind of make this happen. We'll see if Matt LaFleur keeps his job over it. I know our friend Justice is pretty convinced that LaFleur is going to get fired by the end of the year. So,
damn.
I think that would be a little bit rash, personally.
Agree.
Because he's done a lot of good things, and you know you can't control David Bakhtiari being out for the season, and you know you got to start guys who were drafted in the 7th round at offensive tackle. But it's just. I just want to see them have that breakout offense performance just to try to get the ball rolling for next year. And I think this is as good a spot to have as anyone. Like Joey Bosa, I don't think he's like the tier 1 pass rusher he used to be. Derwin James has had a pretty tough season this year. So they're gettable. It's just you got to do it for once.
Yeah, they're much more name than game right now, kind of across the Chargers roster at this point. All right. Next game up here, Tennessee Titans at Jacksonville Jaguars. Jags are 7-point home favorites, 40.5 point over under. It's pretty tough in Jacksonville right now. I mean, this is a good get right spot for the passing game, but I don't know. I'm curious, what's your level of like panic or concern about the Jags offense?
I would say pretty concerned.
Okay.
Pretty concerned. Like they don't really have the wide receiver depth that you know that they need to make that thing work, I think, in all the proper manners. So like I was expecting a lot more out of the Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley connection this year. Zay Jones getting hit with a domestic battery this week. We're going to have to see how that unfolds. But, you know, as far as that's concerned, there's a real chance he might not be in the roster for the rest of the season. Yeah. And then you're looking at like Jamal Agnew, who is just a gadget player.
That drops off fast. I mean,
it's so crazy to me that they keep trying to treat him like he's like a real deal receiver sometimes instead of just a gadget player. But I guess this is where they find themselves.
Even as a gadget player, it's like, all right, enough with the Jamal Agnew plays. But yeah, they have thrown him like real big boy receiver routes, and it's just like, what are we doing here? Isn't the guy like a converted cornerback, or am I mistaken? I don't know.
I don't know if it's cornerback, but he's definitely like a return man, you know?
Yeah.
I don't remember if he played cornerback before he was, I don't know if he's on like the Devin Hester path where, you know, you make enough big plays in the return game. They're just like, well, why don't we have you on offense? But whatever it is, it's got to stop.
He played cornerback in college for San Diego.
See, I was talking to someone the other day, and I was like, why don't the Jaguars like go do their Julio Jones trade this offseason? You know, just blow some picks for Marvin Harrison Jr. See if he can get to the top of the draft. I don't know, but they need like a real big boy receiver, and I think, you know, maybe 2 years off of football ended up hurting Calvin Ridley in a way that, is tough to get back in one season. I mean, we've seen Deshaun Watson really, really struggle since he returned back to football last year. But they need something. They gotta get something out there because there's just no reason when you have like Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence to have one of the worst passing games in the league. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Doug Peterson needs to take a little more ownership of the play calling away from Press Taylor. That's definitely an issue. And they got to help. Obviously, Ridley is not executed as their top X receiver against like press coverage, but they got to do some stuff to like get him moving around. But then it's like, well, we're not putting Jamal Agnew out there as our X receiver. So what are we going to do here? So yeah, that depth has really been an issue for Jacksonville, and the Titans are the Titans, man. I mean, you can go ahead and play Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy and see what happens. I'm at least interested to see if Will Levis can have a rebound performance.
Yeah, the Jags defense is pretty tough. That's a tough matchup for a rookie. And I feel like I just kind of feel like that's where this 7-point spread is coming from. It's not really that the Jags offense is going to do a whole lot. Will Levis, like he can make all the 1% plays that you want, but the down-to-down stuff is super duper inconsistent right now. And that's probably where the Titans can get got if we're just gonna, talk about this in a way where we're not getting too crazy about the rookie quarterback and what's possible. Because I do think there's a chance that he can be their long-term, quarterback for the future. But this is a pretty tough matchup for him this week, and he just struggled last week against the defense where. Mike Caldwell, the defensive coordinator for the Jaguars, he used to coach with Todd Bowles, sometimes do some similar things. And I imagine they'll try to pick up on that game plan from last week because they kind of had him in the torture rack.
Another division matchup here for our next game. Seattle Seahawks, 1-point favorite going to LA to take on the Rams, 46.5 point over under. I'll ask you, Stafford looks like he's going to be back, which is great news because we do not need to see a Carson Wentz performance. Don't need that at this point. Of all the teams, like I don't want to see Carson Wentz play football at all, but of all the teams I wouldn't like mind seeing him on, the Rams are pretty much near the bottom because like why is he not playing for the Jets? Like why is he not playing for one of those type of teams? So that I wouldn't mind having him add another piece of flair to his, Joseph's Technicolor jersey thing he's got going on there with all the different things he's sewn together, the Eagles and the Commander, all that stuff. I wouldn't mind him slapping on another part of it, just not for the Rams. So good thing Stafford's back. Obviously, that's great for Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who haven't really popped off of late, but and this is not like a great defense to try to exploit here in terms of your outside receivers, but obviously that makes things a little more passable. I do feel like the best days are behind the Rams passing offense and like receiver production at this point.
Yeah, this is the back end of what this looks like in there. I feel like they're just kind of keeping the gang together because why not? We had some good times. Maybe we're not going to have any more super good times like winning the Super Bowl, but they've all earned enough to just kind of hang out. I think until it gets like really really untenable. And Stafford's played some good football this year when he's been healthy.
There's been good moments. There's been good moments, and that's kind of like I don't know that we're gonna have those, massive like Puka games, or maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be wrong because I like both of these players, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, but I just kind of feel like my instinct is like the best days for this passing game, even just this year, have probably already passed us by.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think that this is kind of a game where. I'm kind of surprised the Seahawks only favored by 1 because I think they're just
Me too.
They're just a better team.
But they've been a weird offense as well this year, man, where like they haven't really been able to get DK Metcalf activated. He's like 1 of 9 or 2 of 10, depending on which source you look at in terms of contested catch rate. They've been going to him in tight coverage. They've been going to him in these like single coverage, cover 1 type situations, but he hasn't really had some kind of massive breakup game yet. Tyler Lockett's been fine. They don't really have a need for JSN to have a big role when they have these 2 other receivers, but it's just, again, they've been a weird offense.
Yeah, it's been a weird offense, but I think they got enough to score on the Rams. I know the Rams defense hasn't even been bad, especially like as of late. They've been all right, but I don't know. Sometimes you just start to look at like the talent advantages and just player on player. It's just hard not to feel like this is really swung in favor of the Seahawks. Like maybe Stafford and Kupp and Nakua and Aaron Donald, kind of dragged this team to the finish line. But I really like the Seahawks here in this spot.
I do as well. I think they can get it going. And, at some point, DK is going to have a breakout game. It's definitely a personnel advantage for him to do it in this one. So keep your eye on that. Last game, final game in the stream category here. Minnesota Vikings at Denver Broncos. Broncos are 2.5-point favorites, 42.5-point over under. Can we just set the record straight on Russ? Because it's going to be talked about a lot going into Sunday Night Football this week. Russ is playing fine. Russ is playing acceptable quarterback this year. But Cortland Sutton put up like a Russell Wilson apology form on his Instagram story. Did you see this?
I did not see that.
Yeah, he put up like I'll send you the link, but he put up like a apologize to Russell Wilson form and what was the reason for your behavior? Check the box. One of the boxes, by the way, was literally Nathan. You thought Russell Wilson was the problem, not Nathaniel Hackett. I'm like, damn, dude, that was your coach last year.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Jets offense. There ain't a whole lot of answers there.
No, there's not a lot of answers there. But yeah, again, I don't know that we need to apologize to Russ at least full chested yet. He's been fine. He's rebounded from being one of the stone worst quarterbacks in the NFL. But I still think he's again, keeping the train on the tracks, game manager type. But that has been enough for Sutton to have some big catches every single week. Javonte Williams is starting to get rolling as a feature back. And obviously the Vikings got a lot going on with Josh Dobbs on the other side. And potentially, I don't know, is Justin Jefferson going to play in this game? Is he coming back this week or is it next week?
I don't know. I hope it's this week for the sake of some of my fantasy teams, but we'll see. I come to think that the biggest story for the Broncos this year is that 70-point game, that they gave up to the Dolphins earlier this year is not totally reflective of who they've become as a defense over the past, month of football. They're not, a team that you can just walk over. I'm not sure what the schematic changes were or if the players started playing up their talent level, because I never thought that defense, personnel-wise, was something that should be giving up 70 points in a game and, giving up 28 of 29 passes to Justin Fields at one point during that Bears game. So, Kevin O'Connell says that Justin Jefferson's doing everything he can to play. Jay Glazer said he's likely back more in week 12, so next week. But they can still, I think Josh Dobbs just enough of a wild card where you can beat the Broncos. And I thought when Kirk went down, that was the end of it. But they've been able to kind of keep it moving. It's pretty impressive.
Vikings are a good team, and TJ Hawkinson has 27 targets over the last 2 games with mostly Josh Dobbs playing. That is an area where they could potentially still exploit this Broncos defense. They have some good safety stuff like that, but you could get Jordan Addison matched up with Pat Surtain. I think that as much as Addison has shown us some good things, he's also struggled with physical coverage at times. That could still be a matchup advantage for Denver. So Hawkinson could be the guy that eats. And I am very, at least, intrigued with this Ty Chandler taking over as the running back. Charles, get you on a fantasy show. You got to talk about one weird rando backup running back. Ty Chandler might give the Vikings some juice. He was a good waiver wire pickup for people this week. And definitely the Broncos defense has improved, but they've still given up some big yards per carry games the last couple of weeks. So, James Cook and Latavius Murray, when they weren't fumbling the ball, were running all over this Broncos defense on Monday night. So I'm at least interested to see if Chandler can give them a run game, an explosive run game for the first time this year in Minnesota.
Yeah, they've needed something because the run game this year has just been it's tough to watch. They lost Cam Akers. Alexander Madison has been super hit or miss, and they just need some juice. Josh Dobbs has come in and given some explosiveness at quarterback. And I think that, look, if you're going to be an offense that is banged up at, with you're missing someone who's been playing a top 10 quarterback, missing arguably the best receiver in football, you need some variance, right? In terms of explosive plays. So, Josh Dobbs, Ty Chandler, those are the guys where maybe you're not playing the best throughout the whole game, but at any point you could, make something happen and run for, 40 yards or Josh Dobbs, like the scramble he had last week, like that's where their skills kind of come into handy for what this Vikings offense kind of needs right now.
Yeah, I think seeing Dobbs on Sunday night will reveal to a lot of people there's been a lot more fits and starts with this offense than just like what you've seen when he pops up on red zone with some like crazy scramble, but he has still given them really good play. And like you said, some of that like randomness popping up is good for the offense. All right, buddy, we got 3 games in the skip category here. We can go literal rapid fire on these and get you out of here. 3 games in skip, starting with Raiders at Dolphins. I feel a little disrespectful for having Raiders at Dolphins in the skip category.
Don't.
I thought
we
about,
can't stop the Dolphins offense. Come on.
Right. That's like, I thought about like, maybe this is a stream game because you know what, the Dolphins offense is back. They're coming off their bye. This is not a good team. They beat the hell out of bad teams, right? It'll be good, but also the Raiders have done a little something under Antonio Pierce. But then I just think about like Aiden O'Connell's still the starting quarterback for this team, and like, yeah, how are they going to stop the Dolphins?
They won't.
They will not.
Yeah.
And that is that. All right, then. And that on that note, you know what to do from the Raiders offense standpoint in fantasy. Like you play Devontae Adams at lowered expectations. Josh Jacobs there at least committed to the run game, and the Dolphins have been able to be run on at times this year, so that is something to kind of keep in mind there. Next game, Giants at Commanders. I mean, the Giants are made for the skip category at this point.
There's nothing to watch here unless you just like are such a diehard Giants fan that you can't look away from the Tommy DeVito stuff. Like it's a cool story. He's like the most North Jersey man alive. My old coworker Pat Leonard did like some get to know Tommy DeVito thing, and he loves chicken parm with vodka sauce. He's a big fan of Power. He likes to draw himself. Like that's about all the Giants got. Like it's kind of crazy that
I saw you quote tweet the video of his dad in the stands, like that's your 4th down play or that's your 3rd down play or something. You were like, I can hear him. I saw.
Dude, okay, like, because I went to college. So I went to college in Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I played football there. And I would say, I'm not even joking. This is no joke, no exaggeration. I would say like 85% of the team was like Italian guys from New Jersey. So I know a lot about this. And when I saw his dad, I was like, I know like 10 people just like that. And they're very exuberant in how they display themselves. But that's all you got for this game. You know, maybe you can see Tommy DeVito's dad. The Giants, I feel like they've hit the forfeit button on this season, even to the point where they're kind of watching Saquon's workload because you can be honest with yourself and say you're not going to win maybe any games with Tommy DeVito as your quarterback.
Commanders are in a pretty good groove there of like, all right, we got the offense down to McLaurin and Dotson, but then they did the thing last week where it's like we're just throwing to 100 different dudes, and that really makes things very tough in terms of like trying to predict who's gonna catch the ball. I know I think Scott said it on the recap show, but like you could have given me 100 guesses that, you know, who's going to have 100 yards for the Commanders, and I wouldn't have guessed Brian Robinson, right? The non-pass catching running back. So that's a tough offense it's just a tough offense for a lot of different reasons, but Sam Howell's throwing the hell out of the ball. So if these guys pop up for big games, you can't be surprised, but it's really difficult to try to predict them. And final game this week, and again, this team absolutely belongs in the skip category, the damn Panthers. Cowboys at Panthers. Cowboys are a huge road favorite. I feel like the Cowboys have been in multiple spots this year where it's like, yep, they're just going to smoke this team. And I can't imagine they're not going to smoke the Panthers this weekend.
Oh, I mean, like I would say to the Panthers, wear your white uniforms because you don't want to wear black to your own funeral. I think that's just, it's not a good look. I don't, what's the hope here if you're a Panthers fan? You lose by 30 instead of 40? This is nothing. Like Micah Parsons, he's got a chance to break like the sack record in this game. It's going to be very, very ugly.
I think it's going to be ugly. Can't imagine. I mean, you got to be pretty, even Adam Thielen at this point, you got to be pretty down bad to be considering any Panthers in fantasy. So on that note, hey, maybe this is the, I mean, right when everybody gives up on Tony Pollard, maybe this is the game. But again, we put him in the coping corner for the reason. And overall, I'm just interested to see if Rico Dowdle gets any work. Producer Colin is a big Cowboys fan. He's convinced this is going to become like a 50-50 split. I don't know if I see 50-50 split, but I would like to see Rico Dowdle a little more.
Yeah. I mean, why not trot out Deuce Vaughn? Playing the damn Panthers. Put anyone out there. Put Jerry Jones at quarterback. Probably be fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What's Felix
I
Jones
told my friend
doing
who's a
these
Panthers
days?
fan, if you guys score a touchdown this week, you should treat it as a win.
Oh, yeah. Just treat it like you won the Super Bowl, bro. I mean,
seriously.
give me a break.
They have no shot.
No shot. All right. On that note, Charles, appreciate you, buddy. Hell of a show. Broke down all the games. I feel like we are very well prepared for, again, this is a really interesting week where there are some big critical games, but the stream category being so fat makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of games in the middle ground this week. But I appreciate you doing it, buddy. Tell the people what you're working on right now, the exempt list, everything you got going on here at Yahoo.
Working on, the exempt list that comes out every Tuesday as a part of the Zero Blitz podcast feed. I got my 4 Birds columns. I'm writing a handful of times a week on just what's going on in the NFL, what tickles me, what makes me laugh, and I'm also working on some expenses today so I can go to the Super Bowl.
That would be nice. I'd love to see you there. At least I hope I'm going again this year. Fingers crossed. We'll see. We'll see how much the company likes me. But yeah, go get your expense reports done, buddy. We will check in with you hopefully before draft season. But if not, hope we can have you back breaking down all the prospects this year. I hear it's another good receiver class, so I'm at least excited for that.
There's not going to be any more bad receiver classes, I would say.
I know, pretty much forever. Even this year, it's like, this is a weaker class, but it's like, damn, some of these guys in the second round, third round, looking pretty good.
You could say that, and then even it's like, wow, this feels a little down at some spots, but we still have like the best receiver prospects since like Julio Jones and AJ Green were out there and Marvin. So I don't know. It's crazy how talented that position has got, but we'll get to it in the offseason.
Absolutely. It's a good time to be in the receiver business. I'll say that. All right, for now, that's going to do it for us. Be sure to tune in first thing Monday morning to hear Scott Pianowski break down all the action with me from week 11. Until then, we're out.